What's poppin'? What's droppin'? This your boy Live and Direct and absolute full effect out the 832. Y'all already know how I do. I wanted to talk about the reparations and what should be paid out to descendants of slavery, as well as Africans, black people of African descent as well. Because there's going to be four types of reparations I talk about, and there's only a handful that I feel like should be entitled to that. Now you may be saying in this particular video, why am I talking about non-foundational black Americans who deserve reparations? I'll get into that when I get to my second part of the reparations talk. But the first reparations that should be paid out to black people with no disputes whatsoever is the first reparation should be paid out is the 40 acres and a mule reparations, as well, better known as reparations for slavery, which we are entitled to. There's no ifs, ands, no buts about that. We are 1,000% entitled to reparations for the slavery, the perpetual torture, the perpetual, things that we went through as black people. Some of the things that happened in slavery, you know what I'm saying, affects us to this day. You know what I'm saying? So there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it that we should get our 40 acres and a mule. And I'm more confident than not that we will get our 40 acres and a mule. But would that be enough in terms of black people? I don't think so. Because it's still more benefits that black people should be able to earn. I'm not saying turn it down whatsoever. Turn down any money that is entitled to you. Hell, if you get into a car accident, what happens when you get into a car accident? Somebody's liable. And the liable person might be you, or the liable party might be the person you got into an accident with. So to all the white people and some non-foundational black people, other ethnic groups or races, or even some Negroes, African tap dancing, eyes bucking Negroes, get out, eyes bucking Negroes. You should never come over here and say what black people is and ain't entitled to. And you should also not say anything about black people to where you shouldn't even disrespect black people in the United States. That's my thing. We are 1,000% entitled to this 40 acres and the mules because, Sherman T. Williams, who broke his promise, said we were entitled to this, as well as people in the United States. The United States government said we was entitled to 40 acres and a mule. Did we get it? No, because we would not be suffering as terrible as we suffering now, which is why we should get it more than ever. We should get reparations, you know what I'm saying, expeditiously off slavery alone. And this is for the people that particularly it's descendants of slaves. If you can find your ancestors on the 1865 or 1870, Tariq Nasheed can speak more about this. If you can find your family on that 1865 and 1870 treaty, most likely you're a foundational black American. This is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is no dispute here. And if you feel like you want to dispute this, I'm not even going to have this conversation with you because you don't understand, and I don't have time to get into an argument about something that shouldn't even fucking be disputed. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, you've caused a problem that black people are having in the United States, especially people who are descendants of slaves. You know what I'm saying? Which in turns that y'all motherfuckers need to pay up. You need to drop it off. You know what I'm saying? If you, like I say, if you hit somebody in a car accident, you're going to be fucking liable. If it's your fault, you're liable. The same shit should go with paying up reparations. If you fuck up something, you should be able to pay for what you fucked up. I don't want to have any more conversations about we apologize for slavery. I don't have time for that. Fuck your apology and fuck you too. If that's all you think is need to be, shit needs to be repaired. It's just like my goddamn car. My goddamn car, if you hit that motherfucker, it needs to be repaired. Simple as that. Reparations are reparative actions. And you need to repair what you fucked up. And you fucked up in slavery, but never repaired it. You fucked up. All right. You took us from Africa, but you never repaired Africa. You never repaired the problems that we had out there. So since you took us from our homelands, our beautiful homelands of Africa, where we had fruits, mangoes, cattle, and all this other good shit, you need to pay up. Simple as that. You know, I don't want my tax dollars. This is the typical argument we have. I don't want my tax dollars. We shouldn't have to pay for ancestral problems. We're paying for ancestry problems. Being black is a motherfucker. You know, we get the police called on us every day because we're black. We get the police called on us every day because you feel the need to exercise your white privilege, your white supremacist privilege. No, you're not going to get out of this with just a fucking apology and just babble points and talking all around in circles. I don't have time for that shit, and neither does black people who are descendants of slaves. And that's just one of the first things you should pay for. This is one of the first things you should pay for. And I think that should come around $7 trillion. But after y'all motherfuckers get through dropping it off of slavery, then the Indian treaties. You know, and this is probably between 40% and 60% of black people is probably descendants of Indians. You know what I'm saying? And with the other thing is, whoever was owned by Indians, I feel like need to be paid for their reparations. Because some of the Indian treaties of the 1894, 1895, something of that age, it was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to where black people were pushed over with some of those Indian treaties. You know, if you was a slave to a member of the Cherokee tribe or some of the six civilized tribe, I think you should be entitled to reparations as well. Even though you may have not been a direct descendant of slaves, you were oppressed and your family was oppressed. So the fact that Indians own slaves and the fact that some of those black people who are descendants of those Indian tribes, they should be entitled to reparations as well. You know, don't give me that shit about again, this is another thing to where don't give me that shit about what you should pay with your tax dollars, because your tax dollars goes on the Jewish people who, as far as I'm concerned, the United States didn't have anything to do with the Holocaust. The United States did not have anything to do with the Holocaust, and the United States pays reparations to Jews. You can look this up. This ain't nothing. I'm sticks and stones and throwing a bone. This is what it is. You pay reparations to Chinese. You pay reparations to the Japanese. You pay reparations to not only Italy but people of Italian descent. So why can't you drop it off for black people, the very people that built this country? White people did not build this country. You white supremacists didn't build this country. Black people built this country off their labors. If black people do nothing, this country is not the United States of America for what it is. So all I'm asking you motherfuckers to do is drop it off, ho. Drop it off! That's what I want y'all to do. Drop it off! So don't have this bullshit conversation about, my tax dollars, this my tax. I don't give a fuck about your goddamn tax dollars. My tax dollars goes on motherfuckers who shoot my goddamn kids around this motherfucker. My tax dollars goes on police officers who don't even protect the black community. So get the fuck out of here with what your tax dollars is. I don't want to hear shit about no goddamn tax dollars. So drop it off. If your ass, I feel like if your ass was on that, should have been on that Indian treaty, your family should get compensations for being a part of the Indian tribe and oppressed by these Indian tribes. And the problem is a lot of these Indian tribes kick people off the reservation, kick black people off the reservation who should be entitled to that money. So get the hell out of here with that bullshit and drop it off. The third set of reparations that black people should be getting is reparations for the Jim Crow laws. Now this will include some people of some black Africans from Africa, as well as people mainly from Jamaica, Haiti, but I think this should only go out to people, descendants of those people who came in the United States before 1970. Because if you can trace your family back to the census, U.S. Census to 1970, or before 1970, I think you should be entitled to reparations as a black person, whether you're non-foundational black America or not, because you did have to suffer some type of oppression during the Jim Crow laws if you were a black person. After 1970, you can kiss my goddamn ass. And this is no offense to anybody who I'm cool with in terms of African people, because I am cool with some African people. You know what I'm saying? So this is no disrespect to you, but what I am is calling out. I am calling out some of the non-foundational black Americans who are coons. But what I will say is, to those who came in the United States, family members who came in from Jamaica and the West Indies, in parts of Africa, who came in before 1970, I think they should be entitled to reparations, along with the foundational black Americans that was oppressed before 1970. So the Jim Crow laws goes without saying. You've been lynched. You had your nuts cut off as you lynched. Women had their uteruses cut out. Some of the things that happened during the Jim Crow, people that got lynched, their genitalias were cut out. So I think with that going on, with a systematic thing that went on to where black people could not defend themselves, anybody that had family members before 1970 that could trace their family back to 1970, or you could do before 1965. I have no problem with that. I think those people should be entitled to reparations because you've had to go through some type of oppression before that timeline. But after that, I don't, go to hell. That's what I say. So if you've been oppressed under the Jim Crow laws before 1970, some would argue before 1965, I totally agree. I think you should be entitled to reparations. And these reparations that I'm mentioning is four separate reparations. Now, the other reparations, if you want me to add that to that, then I totally agree that I would totally agree. Now, the fourth type of reparations that black people should be entitled to is the reparations after desegregation or fake desegregation. What I'm talking about is drug laws that deliberately target non-violent drug offenders. Not only target non-violent drug offenders, but people who law-abiding citizens. 3-strike laws with law-abiding citizens. And some of those people have been oppressed. People who went to jail, too many people have went to jail for crimes that they not commit, because a lot of that started happening after started happening in the 1970s, 1980s. I think families of members who went to jail for nonviolent offenses, families who went to jail for unfair 3-strike laws descendants of people who got railroaded with the system, unfairly and unjustly. The people that, and I'm speaking of foundational Black Americans, because it's been too many to name. So I think descendants of those particular people should be entitled to reparations for that particular situation. You know what I'm saying? So if you had a family member that went to jail for being a nonviolent drug offender, and one of the reasons why, because a lot of these drug offenders, these violent drug offenders, did less time than some of the nonviolent drug offenders and the people that was railroaded into the system. I think if you're a Black woman that went to jail during this timeline, I think you should also, your families should be entitled to reparations, because a lot of Black women had been euthanized, couldn't reproduce babies and stuff like that. I think families of those particular Black women who've been euthanized, that could be found euthanized, I think those women should be entitled to some type of compensation as well. So I have to mix it up between the victims of the drug war, as well as some of the oppressive mass distribution of what's the word I'm looking for? The maldistribution of resources in the Black community, the destruction of the inner city, the destruction of the inner city should be also entitled to people who lost businesses after 1970. I think Black people who supported the Black community, who own businesses that lost their businesses during the time, I think they should be compensated as well. I know I'm getting tongue tied, but I understand this is a lot to throw out here. You know what I'm saying? So I really think they should be entitled to some type of compensation as well. It's a host of things I can name, like the Tulsa people, the descendants of the Tulsa riots, the descendants of the Wilmington riots, the descendants of the Elaine riots. Those people should be compensated as well. There's people who are descendants of those direct people should also be compensated for the oppression that they have. And this is just to name a few, the Elaine massacre, I should say. So this is just to name a few. Anybody got any other questions, comments, concerns, please comment in the comment section. But these are just a handful that I'm naming. However, also, when I speak of Jim Crow laws, I don't think non-descendants of Black people who are non-descendants of foundational Black Americans should be entitled to reparations before then. I'm going to say that on the line. And I know people are going to be like, well, why are you trying to include everybody? I'm not trying to include everybody, but I'm including people that should be entitled to what they should be entitled to. Because there are some people of Jamaican descent that was very woke, that were Garveyite-like people. So I think those people should be entitled to compensation. However, I will not co-sign any compensation of non-African American people over people who are foundational Black people. I will never co-sign that. The first people who need to get it is descendants of slavery and the descendants of people with the Indian treaties. Descendants. Those are the people that should be compensated more than anything. Other than that, nobody else should be compensated outside of those lines. So people who suffered from the Jim Crow laws, yes, they should be compensated. Not before people who were foundational Black American people and people who were oppressed by the Indian Treaty. So we could go there all day, but it is what it is. So if you could if you could find your family member on the 1865-1870 treaty, whichever one Brother Tariq Nasheed said, if I'm getting tongue-tied, then more likely you should be entitled to some type of compensation before anybody. And again, this is no piss on African people who respect African Americans. I'm not disrespecting you my intention is not to disrespect you under no circumstances. But you do got a coon problem up in Africa that people need to fix, and that needs to be fixed expeditiously. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But again, if you suffered from the Jim Crow laws, if you're a black person that lived in the United States who suffered from the Jim Crow laws, I think you should be compensated, but not before descendants of slavery. So, you have any comments, questions? If you have my Facebook account, my Twitter account, Instagram, you are more than welcome to actually give me some comments and questions and concern. So once again, it's your boy, live and direct, in absolute full effect, out the 832. Y'all already know how I do.